So because I'm 100% disagreeable and and not polite at all, I want to get the elephant out of the room. I do like to do that. And there's been a recent video that you put up, a message to the Muslims. And before I say this, I do want to speak about the important topics, the theological topics, and all these kind of postmodernism. That will come. But I just wanted to mention this first, because for me, it's just get the elephant out of the room, and then we can move on.
Sometimes it's just replaced by a slightly smaller elephant.
Well, a smaller elephant is better than nothing.
Yeah.
Right? I was going to say is that it didn't land well with a lot of the Muslim community.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why is that it was seen as condescending. It was seen as kind of patronizing. What was your intention with this video exactly?
To start a dialogue stupidly and badly. Because that's how you have to start them. We talked already about the idea of tolerance. And I'm actually not here to be tolerant. Because tolerance sort of presumes that I know what I'm doing and you guys don't, but I'll put up with you anyways. And see, I don't actually think I know what I'm doing exactly. And so I think, well, you might have something to teach me. And so it's not so much tolerance as, I would say, hopefully something approximating an expression of reasonable humility, which is, well, first of all, we occupy the same space, and as far as I'm concerned, it'd be better if we got along, and we've all had our own revelations, personally and let's say socially, and we don't know how to integrate those revelations, and that's rough, that's hard. And so I'm here to listen, and the message was preposterous in some sense, although not much more so than the message I made to Christians, which I wouldn't say was exactly flattering. And, I thought it would probably ruffle some feathers, but I thought it might also initiate a dialogue, or at least further it. And that has happened, I mean, certainly there were many people who were irritated at me and thought that I was being condescending, and I wasn't trying to be, because I do have a lot of people who are paying attention to my lectures around the world on the Islamic side, which is quite surprising to me, especially with regard to the attention that's been given to the biblical lectures. And I don't take any of that for granted. And I wasn't trying to either capitalize on it or interfere with it. I was trying to do the next stupid thing that might move things forward a bit. And it's actually worked, I would say. Well, first of all, I am here, and I know that's not a direct consequence of that message, but at least it didn't break it. And there have been many other Muslim groups who've reached out to me in a serious way, at least in part because of that. And so I think we have to understand that we're going to stumble into each other a fair bit if we actually try to talk, because of all the elephants and the snakes that are lurking under the carpet. And I think it's a very good thing to get them out in the open. I'm a very agreeable person, as it turns out. Yes, I know, it's to my detriment, but I
wouldn't have guessed, to be honest, that you're very agreeable.
Yes, it's one of my major character flaws, but I don't like conflict at all. But the reason I would say I'm prone to engage in it is because sometimes what's under the carpet needs to be revealed, because it's going to cause a lot of trouble if it just sits there and brews or broods and multiplies. And so it is one of the advantages of disagreeable people, having them around, because they will haul things up for inspection that everyone else might be loath to confront. The downside is, well, you might do that too often, and that's a hard thing to get right. So I'm not here in a spirit of tolerance. I'm here in a spirit of ignorance. And I'm hoping, see, the other thing I've been thinking through, and you guys can tell me what you think about this, is it seems that in the situation we're in now, sort of globally speaking, that it would be useful for people of religious faith to note that there are other people of religious faith with whom they have much in common, one of them being religious faith, and that they are also confronting, as people of religious faith, a world that is attempting to, let's say, shake itself free of that. And
Yeah.
so it isn't exactly obvious to me that it's a great time for people of religious faith to concentrate on their differences, given that there are perhaps more important elephants to address, let's say, or fish to fry. And so I've been I'm very ignorant about the Islamic tradition, and I'm trying to rectify that. It's very difficult to step outside your own culture and to really understand someone else's. And I'm under no illusions, I hope, about the degree of understanding that I've managed, but I have tried to understand what we might share in common, and that's crucial. And so certainly one of the ideas that we all share in common on the religious front, let's say, is that there is an ultimate unity that should be placed above all else. And so that's part of the great monotheistic tradition. And I'm going to speak mostly as a psychologist.
He's right about everything he's saying, right? People of religion, I mean, more so like Christians and Muslims, should be together more than ever right now with what's going on in the world today. Our two religions are our religions are the closest to one another. Similarities and the stories intertwine with little details that are different, or little big details that are different. There are details that are different, but our stories are similar, and together we are a huge population. And the powers that be that are moving the world right now are not religious. Not in, or they are, but not. They're anti-religious. So we absolutely need to do something, dude. We need to communicate. We need to come together. Now, I've been living in a Muslim country for 8 years now, and Christians and Muslims, like, they do fine with each other here in Indonesia. I mean, everybody's struggling. Not everybody. There are some people who you know, do pretty well. And it is, I mean, it is a Muslim country, so they hold the power in most positions. But overall, I mean, that's not a horrible thing. More so, I mean, it's a religious focused country. I mean, it has its issues, but like marriage is important. The family unit is important. The family tree, the men and women have their own jobs, and or not jobs, but their responsibilities within the relationship. Traditional, which is what America has lost all those values. I mean, if you look at the Muslim world, man, Dubai is I've never been there. I'd like to go. I mean, it's from what I've heard, it's an amazing place, and from what I've seen, it's an amazing place, and there's a lot of success there, and safe. Uh, I don't know what happened to our Christian countries, man. We We've been usurped by the devil. The devil holds the reins.
Just rather than as, say, an advocate of the Christian tradition, because it isn't obvious to me that
Let me kind of push back a little bit on
Yeah.
that point, because you're an individual, like, obviously in your newest book, you're talking very categorically about precision. And I would say you're an individual that is very precise. You're categorized, like, if I was to say anything, I would say that you're an individual that's scrupulously meticulous in exactitude and, I don't know, meticulousness or whatever, yeah? So you speak and you think about what you're going to say before you say it. That's what you're known for. And in fact, if someone says something which is kind of off the market a little bit, you pull them up for it, right? And
you know, usually because I don't understand it then.
yeah, no, for example, like the Kathy Newman interview, like the assumptions and the questioning that she had when she was questioning herself, you pulled her up on it. And that's why it became so popular, the discussion was so popular. And you're a clinical psychologist. So what I was going to say is this, like, for example, if I were to make a video, right? I say this message to the, to white Canadians or something, yeah?
Yeah.
And I said,
It's hard to talk to them.
I say, look, sensitively, why don't you reach out to some Russians, or heaven forbid, reach out to the Black Africans or First Nation people, whatever it may be. How do you think the community of white Canadians, let's say, for the sake of argument, will react to that kind of message?
Well, if it was you,
Yeah.
well, you're pretty disagreeable, so you'd probably get bit back a lot.
Yeah, but exactly.
I don't, it's hard to say until you do it,
Yeah,
I mean, I have reached out to other communities, let's say. I did an interview with a friend of mine who's a Native American carver who lives on the West Coast. And, I'm not very happy with the narrative that's being promoted in Canada, which is that the European settlement of Canada is best viewed as genocidally colonial. And having said that, my friend, this carver, was in a residential school in Canada, and the residential schools were put forward by the government in an attempt, and other institutions, in an attempt to separate the Indigenous children from their families and then socialize them rapidly according to European norms. And there was some positive motivation for that, and sometimes that helped and worked. But one of the things that did happen was that some schools were, let's say, invaded by people of a pronounced pedophilic and sadistic bent. And my friend ended up in one of those schools, and his life was so dreadful that you can't even hear about it without serious emotional damage. And so, I went forward with that discussion, and it was very contentious, but it went very well. And it told a story that was true and needed to be told.
Yep.
And so, you step into foreign territory at your peril, that's for sure. But, and it was relatively difficult for me to arrange for this to be a possibility.
Yeah, of course.
But my thought, again, because I'm trying to look for what we have to offer each other rather than what divides us, I thought it was worthwhile.
In an economy as volatile as this one, it's important to have control when you're making a big purchase like a new car. That's where Cars Inc. comes into play.
Okay,
Cars Inc.
come
is
on now.
And
best deals.
I also push back on the point that this is a foreign culture, because I think that Islam, and you've mentioned this in the lecture as well, that Islam has now become part of, Western culture.
Yeah, well, that's the open question. As we noted in the introductory remarks, it's like, well, is Islam part of the West? We're kind of having the same discussion about Russia in some real sense. And that's really going well at the moment.
Yeah, so there's that part. But what I would say is that, if there is a bloody history of Western colonialism, and that's almost undeniable. Like, for example, look at Algeria, for instance. Algeria, when it was annexed.
It's not even
no dispute.
history, dude. I mean, it's like, that's literally, within the past 15 years, there's been colonialism. I can't imagine Jordan's gonna, denounce it or deny it. But colonialism hasn't gone anywhere. I mean, it's taking place with Russia right now, But Russia is different than the U.S. The U.S. has been doing it since World War II.
Dispute in what happened there. So the issue, I'm giving you one example of many. The Spanish colonialism of Latin America, for example. There are things that happened, and I'm not saying that's not things that happened on only just
say that
on the
again.
Western Front.
Yeah,
There are things that happen on the Muslim front as well, of course.
this is true.
Yeah, no doubt about it, right? No, I'm not going to stand here and defend the muwahhidun who
mean,
came
yeah.
and were very intolerant to Jews and Christians and kicked them out of their homes and so on
Yeah.
like that, who existed in Spain as well, in fact. So the point is, I feel like, I don't know, as a psychologist, I think my question would be to you, don't you think, is it of any benefit to be concessionary in this regard? Like to start off the discussion by saying, like, we know that these
It's
are
an
things that
issue
could
all
cause
over the
resentment.
world.
Right?
Yes.
Because, like, for example, I know a lot of Algerian people, and this is very clear in their historical memory.
Yes.
And the accusation will be that the West have colonial amnesia here. They are not taking into account what they've done. I'll be honest with
Yeah,
you.
well, they don't
yeah.
even know how. Well, okay. So,
See what I'm saying?
yeah, well,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, look, here's how I would address that psychologically. In many of the mythological stories that I've read, there is the motif of the evil uncle. And so, for example, in the ancient Egyptian cosmology, there were four deities, four central deities, although a host of associated deities. And one of them was Osiris, who was the deity of the state. That might be a good way of thinking about it. And he had an evil brother, Seth, who was always conspiring in the background to overthrow the state and to establish his own rule, say, based on power. And the Egyptians, this is thousands of years ago, had figured out by that point, because their society was quite large, that there was something in the social structure itself that posed a threat to the structure, and that was the tendency for the structure and its leaders to become willfully blind and for conspiratorial powers or patterns that would use resentment and the desire for power to overthrow that. And they thought of Osiris as willfully blind and Seth as an eternal danger, and that's true. But there's another element to the evil uncle too, which is that in some real sense, and it's a very difficult thing to sort through morally, all of us walk on blood-soaked ground because human history is, in some regards, a nightmarish catastrophe. And some of that's just because life was so difficult, but it's also because people did in unbelievably cruel and malicious and deceptive, committed unbelievably cruel and atrocious and deceptive acts. And so we're all stuck with this problem that here we are in relative peace and harmony so far, although we seem to be doing everything we can to try to disrupt that at the moment. And part of the price that's being paid for that is an endless litany of historical catastrophe. And then we all have to face up to, well, what does that mean for us in terms of our individual responsibility? And how do we construe ourselves and our society in light of that fact? And we could go back and forth continually about whose historical atrocities were worse.
Yes.
And that's a rough contest because, the devil is definitely in the details there. And then it also brings up the other problem, which is, well, when the Spaniards went to Central America, a lot of the bloodshed they produced, or the death they produced, was actually a consequence of the introduction of disease, because that took out about 95% of the native population in the Western Hemisphere. And then the conquistadors were, well, maybe they weren't the finest representatives of the highest flowering of Western civilization. We don't know to what degree they were the sort of thugs that couldn't get along at home and went out adventuring. And even if I, say, attempted to take full responsibility for that, I'm not sure what it would mean, because I suspect I have a lot more in common with you people in the modern world than I do with Spanish conquistadors from 300 years ago. Now, I'm not saying I bear no responsibility for the bloodshed of the past, but I would say we all bear that responsibility, and that's something, I would say that's something like the conception of original sin.
Yeah, and that's the point of difference. To be honest, I would disagree with that point. Like, as a
Yeah.
Muslim, there is a verse in the Quran that says, وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى, that one soul should not bear the responsibility of someone else's actions.
Yeah, I was about to say, man, like I didn't do shit, dude. So, I mean, as far as like America or whatever, like everybody as a whole, in a sense, is responsible because we didn't stop our government from, endless wars. And how many of those wars were like based off of lies and like spread like wildfire all over the Middle East and Africa? It's a it's a it's a mess. Uh, I didn't do nothing. I mean, if you were to you were to try to blame the people there, like what are they gonna do, bruh? I mean, you get people who go out protest, voice their opinion, but that shit don't go nowhere. It doesn't matter. And the U.S. government is just so powerful and so corrupt, so controlled by central bank and oligarchy of this oligarchy of bankers and corporations or corporation holders and the power that the military has that is in their control, and everybody is so divided, dude. There's so many equations that go into it that it's like, I mean, can't really cast blame on the majority on many fronts, but there's definitely a problem. And if it's possible for us to come together, period, dude, it would better than the alternative. Clearly better than the alternative. We're all just people, man. We bleed red blood. We live. We die. We believe in whatever we believe in. And we struggle through this roller coaster we call life to try to make a living for our families or ourselves. And many, many people are affected by both sides. Not necessarily like whether it be like American imperialism or Islamic extremism. It's definitely a lot of people struggling. I mean, if you were to look at the overall numbers, they're definitely American or Western imperialism. I mean, you would say American imperialism, but it's not. Very rarely America goes into a war that like other NATO countries don't follow. So, and it's because they're all owned by the same people. We need to come together, and it's not even just Muslims and Christians need to come together. We need humanity need to break our chains from our government and come together, especially those that are involved in that they shouldn't be involved in. As far as like Indonesia doesn't really. I mean, Indonesia hasn't really done anything against its neighbors, but Indonesia again is like just recently become like or started to modernize. I mean, that could also be. There is a central bank here, and that's another reason for the whole American imperialism to annex states and all central banks, which is that goes into the whole Syria and Iran thing. I don't even know if they managed it in Syria. I mean, Russia was involved in that, so and by the time that ended, Trump was in office. So but Iran is still on the table for these people, and we're on the verge of like a world war. Like let's hope not, but we it's not looking good.
Yeah, well, that's the other ethical complication.
Yeah.
It's
So-
like,
so
can you call me out
Yeah.
in relationship
No,
to
no,
the
no,
atrocity of the
of course-
past?
of course
And-
not, no.
Well,
Yeah,
but it's
yeah.
complicated, right? Because
Yeah.
because at the same time you do say, and I don't mean you personally,
yeah.
but we can say things like, well, the West is not bearing sufficient responsibility for its colonial past. And so at some level, that kind of devolves down to the individual. It's
So
like,
let me kind of rephrase it then. I think that's more of a left wing.
Yeah, see, he just said the same thing I said like 5 minutes ago. I got carried on.
Criticism. It's like, this reparations and affirmative action
Yeah,
programs. All
yeah.
that. I'm not advocating any of that, and nor do I even believe in any of that, to be honest with you.
Nor me.
Yeah. So what I was putting as an alternative to that is this: is that there is this kind of, I would call this maybe an Orientalist, a new Orientalist narrative, which states that
I don't know when we're speaking of American fuck. I don't know why we are speaking about American colon. Okay, dude. Fuck me. I do not know why we are speaking about American colonialism in the past tense when we literally, not we literally, I didn't do shit, dude. So, like, I need to use the right pronouns. Today, pronouns are important. That America, quite literally, recently was involved in imperialist colonialism. I mean, it's clear colonialism is different than imperialism, but it's the same shit. When you invade another person's country and you try to install some puppet government, dude, I mean, that's the same fucking. That's the same thing. Anyway, I'm gonna end this one now at 20 minutes instead of posting like an hour and 36-minute video. And, damn, this is gonna have parts for sure. I do want to watch this, and this. I imagine this is gonna be interesting. Good info. So, if you enjoyed watching with me, any of my commentary or whatever, give it a like, subscribe, and tune in for more. Thanks for watching.